Hi there, I'm Kristin Sgro from Neighborhood Church, one of the pastors here, and on my left I have Sharlia Maurer, Administrative Director and Kids Ministry Director. And if you've been following us for any time, we have been going through Pete Scazzero's Emotionally Healthy Relationships book, and we are in chapter 5, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if you've been following us, we're in chapter 5, and chapter 5 is all about incarnational listening. And that's kind of an odd word. Not many people would know what incarnational listening is. I didn't know before I had ever learned about it. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a definition of what that means. So Pete Scazzero defines incarnational listening as the following: to listen at a heart level with empathy, attuned to the words and nonverbal communication of another person, so that the other person feels felt by you. And then there's a quote after by David Augsburger, and it says, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. So, Sharlia, they have some pre-session reading in this chapter that we're all to do, and maybe some of our listeners have even read, the pre-session stuff. So tell us and tell our viewers what your biggest takeaways were from the pre-session reading.
Yeah, so the pre-session reading is actually an activity where you rate yourself as a listener. I kind of had to chuckle because there was some sarcasm in there and right at the beginning, but it was really eye-opening for me to be honest with myself, with how good or bad a listener, and not answer as to how I wanted to be, but really how I am today. And so my husband and I we did it separately. We took a couple minutes and rated ourselves, and then we shared them, and then we did for each other. And it does encourage you to do it with a spouse or someone close to you, and it said that you might be surprised, and we were. I think doing that activity before we went further in this chapter was really helpful because for me, it softened my heart to hear how he thinks I am a good listener. Now, clearly, I didn't get them all, but to hear those things, it softened my heart and really readied my heart to be prepared for what was to come.
That's good. That's real good.
It was good.
That's very sweet of him to say that. So, the pre-session reading, you and your husband did that, and you said your heart was ready to receive what was coming next. Even in this chapter, they talk about Jesus being the beautiful model of listening. So that's kind of, bringing glory to him that your husband's saying that you're a good listener. Yeah. Obviously room for growth, but that brings glory to God, and that's awesome. In this chapter, they talk about 4 things that Jesus modeled as a beautiful listener, right? And one was Jesus left his world. When we listen, we leave our world. That's a tough thought, because I'm always thinking of what I'm thinking next.
Right.
Number 2, he entered our world. We enter another's world through listening. Number 3, he held on to himself. When we listen, we don't have to agree. Growing up, I always thought, gotta give head nods that I agree, and it was like, what if I don't agree? I can't do a head nod. Number 4, Jesus hung between 2 worlds, and I loved this. Jesus hung between 2 worlds. I may not like what I hear, but I can hang between the tension of our different perspectives. So all of that to say, there's an exercise that the book encourages you to do in this chapter of practicing incarnational listening. And so Sharlia has graciously allowed us into her exercise that she did with her husband. And so I'm sure this model of listening taught you guys well.
Yeah, there's a few great big points that we realized quickly. First, we needed to have our heart in the right place, right? So sometimes people listen to respond.
Yes.
And this was being in that other person's world, leaving your own world. And if you're preparing your answer while you're listening, you're still in your world. So we identified that quickly. And also that we need to do this more often.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
It was an eye-opener for, trying to be in that moment. I think, culturally we talk about being present, whether it be as a mom with your children. For me, that's the biggest one. And I think sometimes it's hard for me as a listener to remain present, because my head can go in so many different things in my world, right? And so I'm not preparing myself to be present for that person.
Right. Especially if you're getting ready to tell something somebody did wrong, it's really hard to stay in their world and not start forming your judgments.
Absolutely. And one of the things after the activity, which was really good, it does challenge you to jot down some notes that you have about what the experience was like for you as the speaker and the listener.
Yes.
And I loved that because, you can practice something, but if you can't look back, you're really not going to learn from that experience.
So true. That's a good point.
And, what I learned as being the speaker was that using the verbiage, as corny as it sometimes feels, it was freeing because I knew I was going to communicate something effectively, efficiently, by being intentional with my words, and also me slowing down enough to choose my words was a way that I could protect his heart and not only looking out for mine by getting my point across.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So you're saying, that for your experience as the speaker, you felt safe to be able to share, safe in sharing her heart, but safe in protecting her husband's heart as well. That's a great thing. Was it hard to remember that even while you're talking, even through this verbiage?
Yeah, because I'm human, and so I'm worried that he might get defensive, or I might bring something up that I shouldn't, and so it can be an unstable ground if you're not both meeting on new ground, right? If you're clinging to where you want to be, and the stance that you want to hold, instead of understanding sometimes that these things are apart from you, and you still care about the other person opposite of you, and that's why you're doing this. So
that's good. How about, did you guys come up with any obstacles you'll both need to overcome to grow into a person that listens well, to maybe hit some of that criteria that marked Jesus's character and how he listened that we went over?
Yeah, being present.
So hard. Even right now, I'm thinking, what am I gonna say next? What am I asking her next? I better look at my notes.
Am I checking everything that I wanted to communicate? And that is something that you're supposed to do. Is there more that you have to say? Or even, what is the main takeaway you want me to have from this?
Yes.
And so I think just being intentional with the key things that help to say and communicate in those moments helps you really become a good listener, because you have to be thinking of that other person's heart and not just your own. I found that clarifying as we were talking really helped me listen well.
Okay.
And eliminating old assumptions.
That's good.
And so we had to kind of circle back a little bit. And so what I found was the previous chapters were really helpful. And I could notice the times where maybe I didn't completely go through a chapter as in depth as I should have, that could have helped me for this activity that we did. So it was helpful for me to realize I want to go back. I now have a deeper desire to go back. And to make sure that I can do these things and check my heart so that we have better communication moving forward.
Okay, so you want to make sure you're not falling back into making assumptions while you're doing these types of conversations.
Yeah, being a listener, I think understanding someone's world is huge. It does touch on family origin, and just every piece that you can understand of that person's position while leaving your own helps you come together in a way that you wouldn't have realized was easy to do.
Right.
When it so often feels like communication can be so hard.
Yes. He talks a ton about family of origin, and it does give you compassion. I mean, it really gives you compassion to see this is all generational. Not, we have our own will.
Right.
And so we have the choice to act out of those generational type of good characteristics and bad characteristics. But it definitely gives you compassion, and that people don't just change overnight, right?
Right.
If you've never been a good listener, just after doing this exercise once, you're not going to be a good listener. You said earlier about how you need to practice it, and you have to look back at where your mistakes were. And even that alone, we don't want to do that.
And even if you do believe yourself to be a good listener,
Right.
you're going to learn that, because of our differences, you may not be the best listener for that other person.
Yes, that's a great point. Great point.
So again, understanding that other person's position and understanding how you are as a listener, and even receiving that feedback of how that person
Right.
perceives you as a
That's hard.
listener. Oh yeah.
That's hard.
But it was also, like I said, it was good for my heart, and
That's good.
and both of our hearts.
That's
so.
good. Maybe we'll hear from Ryan, her husband, in a couple weeks. Maybe we'll interview him on the next chapter. That's good. Listening is hard. Listening is very hard, and one of my biggest struggles is not thinking while the other person's talking. I like to relate, so it's kind of a gift to be able to relate, but it's not relating well if I'm tuning you out in order to, remember something that you touched that reminded me something of my life. Like, that's not good listening. So I have a long ways to go as well. So thanks for sharing everything with us today, and thank your husband for us.
I will.
And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. If you've not tuned in to any of the other previous chapters that Sharlia is mentioning, that are very, very helpful, you ought to go back, review those chapters, and we will see you next week. So thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.